Okay, well, hey there, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today for the Confident Sober Women podcast. And I'm so excited to share some time today with Julie and really chatting about some really important stuff for this holiday season that I think most of us, especially ladies, can relate to. And we're just going to see how it goes. Hopefully, it's helpful. So, Julie, I'm going to turn the mic over to you and let you share a little bit more about your story, and then we're going to chat.
Sounds great. Thanks, Shelby. It's great to be here. My story. So I've been alcohol free since 2018. So coming up on 7 years. And like so many other women, my drinking really ramped up once I had children and moved out to the burbs. Alcohol was always a part of my life, but it was fun. It was shiny. It was work trips and dinner parties and brunches and things like that. But once I really sort of settled down and, my husband and we have two small kids, I found my pattern becoming more isolated, right? We're home every night. Kids go to bed. What else is there to do? Mommy wine culture, all the things. So I easily fell into a pattern of, the whole I deserve this mentality. And eventually, I'm wildly oversimplifying here, but I really just started to get sick of it and sick of myself and sick of the Groundhog Day effect and just feeling like 80% all the time or 65% of myself all the time. So I quit. I walked away from it. In terms of how I did that, like a lot of listeners out there and a lot of other guests on your podcast, Shelby, I really leaned into this wonderful online community that's out there that until just a few years ago wasn't really there, at least like it is now. Um, Other women telling their stories, other women that sounded like me or didn't, just a broad, diverse perspective of other people's relationships with alcohol. Um, all the quit lit. I had a coach that I worked with. So I really had this, as we've heard before in the community, this patchwork recovery process in place that I sort of cobbled together and just worked really, really well for me in the days, weeks, months, and really years after saying goodbye to alcohol.
Wow. Thanks so much for sharing that part of your story. It's so, like you mentioned, this is how it works, right? I mean, this is the critical component, I believe, for recovery, really, from anything, is to find a community and connection that works with you for you, that you can relate to, that supports you in your journey to make the changes you want to make. And, that sounds like that's what you found. I did the same thing. And I do believe that is how it works. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes on, and like you've been sober for kind of a while now. Congratulations on 7 years, I think you said. So, once we stay sober, once we get and stay sober, kind of beyond that first year, we really start to step into, I feel like, a different phase of our recovery journey. That early sobriety stuff is super hard. It's sticky, it's messy. There's just a lot of emotional upheaval. A lot. Sometimes there's other challenge, legal trouble, all kinds of stuff. But then after we start to hang out for a while, it really becomes much more of that emotional sobriety piece. I don't know if you would agree with that. And then just kind of learning how to like live this life as a human being who doesn't use substances to numb out, and I find that to be the harder journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to echo something that you said on one of your earlier podcast episodes around, I think it was either you or maybe it was your guest around surrounding yourself with your A team, being sober, early on and to this very day, like really got me to evaluate and reevaluate sort of who I spend my time with and what I spend my time doing. Um and I think when you take stock of that and you have clarity around that, it just lifts us up, right? And there's a ripple effect to that. So I think it's really important to kind of know who those people are that nourish you, right? And don't deplete you, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And that's tricky too, I feel like. And also, like so many other things. I mean, I'm older, woman now, like in my later 40s. And so we age and stage too,
Hmm.
like the things that I liked and enjoyed and wanted and needed in my later 20s and through my 30s are not the same. My kids were young. I had three little ones in a very short time. So I was doing all of that mommy stuff for years, decades, really.
Hmm.
And, as for me, that has started to kind of wane into another phase. The things that I find that I need and the people and the kinds of support and things that I need are different now. I don't know if you can relate to that. And I'm
Absolutely.
curious about how that plays into like what you're feeling now about, how does that work? Like how do we reconcile ourselves with this new us, this new changing version of ourselves to like with friendships, maybe with work, balance,
Yeah.
partners, finances, all of that.
Yeah. I think that simple phrase, or adage, quality over quantity, like really rings true for me here, right? Like that, having a small tribe or small group of deep, intimate relationships over sort of casting the wide net of acquaintances. And this is a common theme, I think, and I've heard throughout this community of sort of surface, small talk, sort of superficial chit chat kind of goes out the window. We all learn that one thing about ourselves, which is we were never really good. We're never really that good at that or that interested in it. And whether drinking made it easier, I think to eat, every one of us will have to answer those questions. But I think 9 times out of 10, most of us at this stage, I'm also in my late 40s. I have a little bit of a been there, done that mentality. Like I'm happier with the quiet and the stillness. I'm happier with less, if that makes sense. And that's not to say I don't need to, and we don't all need to be continuing to like do the work and remember why we're here. But I think part of that comes with age, and part of that comes with really like taking the inventory and getting to know ourselves as we change and as we go through different life stages, because it is different.
It is. I agree with you about the age thing. I mean, for me, I'm like, I feel like I'm just playing it out day by day right now, right? Like right in front of my face. And I guess I never really appreciated any of that because when you're younger, I don't know. I didn't think about uh, age really, or I
Hmm.
don't know, just doing the thing. And then, kids and stuff really take up so much of your time. You're just trying to get through the day. But
Hmm.
now, and also in my early sobriety time, throughout my active addiction, and then in definitely the first probably many years of my early sobriety, I I did have a lot of contentment. I had some peace and serenity, more than I had ever had up to that point before. But I still did not feel comfortable with my own self. Like I couldn't be quiet. I had to actually practice. I didn't start doing this till probably after I was like 10 years sober. Practice like riding in my car with the radio off, like
Mm.
physically like make myself have times where there wasn't like background noise or the,
Hmm.
something going on. And that took for me anyway, and maybe it's the ADHD or it's just the recovery piece or whatever. I didn't feel comfortable with myself.
Hmm.
And I didn't
Hmm.
really like myself, I think, for years. And so I had a lot of learning to do around that piece and getting just really comfortable in my own company. And I find that that's for me what age and the work on emotional sobriety has done, and learning how to discern, what are my priorities. And I think maybe that's kind of like what we're trying to say is like, what are our really, and to me, it also comes down to like a values question, like when you
Hmm.
really dig in, which who in their 20s and 30s really is doing a lot of values work. If you haven't, I would encourage you to. It's a big part of like the work I do. But when you start to identify what your core values are, and then be making every decision through the lens of
Hmm.
those core values, then it helps you to just say, oh, I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to buy this. I want to see this play, all the things,
Yeah.
let's make sense.
Yeah. And all the things unapologetically too, right? Like connecting with your values and using those values as sort of a beacon, right? For walking through life in a state of calm or flow or not, right? And realizing that dissonance. Like it's powerful work. And I think I agree. I encourage everybody to spend some time doing values work because it's so insightful.
It is. And I think it's so important to this very concept around, especially this time of year with the holidays. It's a lot of pressure. No
Mhm.
matter who you are or where you are in life, generally speaking, you're going to be asked to do things. You're going to be, there's things around time, there's around finances, there's energy, all that. And so this actually came up when I was with some women last week. And one of the women was really expressing like how it's just very hard for her to say no to things.
Mm.
Like, and I just, for me personally, like it's not that hard for me anymore. I feel like I've not that I've got it down, but like I feel pretty comfortable and confident about this anymore. But I've really worked hard on it. But we really pressed her on like why, what about this is so hard, And so I guess I'm curious to hear from you. Like, what do you find is so hard about that? Like, why do we struggle with like we get the invitation or we feel the pressure to buy a gift for somebody or to go to lunch with some or whatever the thing, whatever the ask is, to volunteer at this thing. Why do we have trouble with it?
Yeah, yeah. I'm so glad you asked that. And you're right. I mean, everybody has trouble with this, and it is definitely something with all the women I work with that comes up all the time. And I haven't been immune to this either. I think it comes down to if I were to sort of boil it down to what the main reason I've heard and that I have felt in my own life too is that none of us want other people to think badly of us. None of us want to let other people down. And I'm air quoting here, let other people down because we're making a whole lot of assumptions about the other people and the question being asked and their attachment to the answer. Um, there's this quote. It's not an original thought, but I love it, and I always lean back to it that every time you say yes to something, just so that you don't disappoint someone else, you're disappointing yourself. And it's so true when you think about that. If you challenge someone and challenge yourself and say, "Well, do you really want to do this? Or do you really have to say yes to this?" And if the answer is yes, getting curious with yourself on why. And so this obstacle or objection handling often comes down to, okay, we don't want to disappoint anybody else. We don't want them to think poorly of us. Is it possible that they will admire the self agency and want some of it? Or is it possible they will be impressed with our boundaries? Is it possible that there'll be a ripple effect, right? We don't know. The only thing we go to in our mind is they're going to be upset with me. And so I often work with clients on different tools and strategies for practicing saying no. And it doesn't have to be for something big, right? We don't want to start out with, no, we're not coming to Christmas Eve, brother. We might want to start out with something a little bit smaller. No, I don't want pizza tonight for dinner, right? Like it is a mental muscle and it's hard, right? But we have to work at it like we work at every other muscle in our mind and body.
Oh, I'm so glad that you used the muscle reference because I think that practice part is something that we do not hear enough about, and we certainly don't give ourselves a lot of grace for. I know, again, in sort of my younger years, earlier coming up, and still this is a work in progress always, but I'm way better. I had a really hard time speaking up for myself. Like, I had a lot of conversations in my head, even with my husband or people in my life, but I really just couldn't put those words out to like speak up for what I want. Even as simple as like, where do you want to go to dinner? Things like
Yeah.
that. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I was basically like a doormat for most of my life. And I'm
Mhm.
not saying that my life was like terrible or anything. I'm just saying like that's how I lived. And as I grew up in sobriety, I did start to become a little bit bolder. I gained confidence. I built the muscles of strength to be able to like value myself enough, which is what you were saying, right? When
Yeah.
we make these decisions, we are valuing ourselves enough to do the things that we want to or not or don't want to do. And so then I learned how to be able to say like, oh, actually, I would rather have pizza than tacos tonight, you know? And it is very simple and it sounds silly when you do that, but you know, most of the time when someone's asking us something like that, a lot of the, maybe not most, a lot of the times we do care. We have an opinion, you know, but we say we don't care or
Totally.
I don't care. It's fine. Whatever you want, you know. Now there are times for me and maybe for you too where I'm just like, I actually really don't have an opinion about this. Like, so really
Hmm.
what you do, like, cool, cool. I'm good with either one. But a
Yes.
lot of times we do. And so in those small moments, I definitely agree with you. If we could practice, just take the risk, you know, the perceived risk anyway, of saying what you actually want or don't want.
Hmm.
And especially with people that really care about you, you know, generally speaking, they're not going to harm you. You know, they're not
Right.
saying they're going to
You're
leave you.
not going to die.
No. Yeah. So like that's a great way to practice that and just start to get comfortable with speaking up, with using your voice in that way.
Yeah.
And I also love what you said about like, you know, we could be modeling this. You know, we could be modeling it for our children, but even for our
Mhm.
partners or our other adults in our life, we could be when you create boundaries, which is really what this is all about. That's the
Mhm.
fancier word, right? For letting go or saying no.
Yeah,
We create boundaries. We're telling people how we want to be treated. We're teaching
exactly.
other people how to treat us. And so that is modeling. That's modeling for our community, for our workplace, for all of it. So every time we do something like that and somebody sees it, even if their feelings are hurt, eventually, maybe not. A lot of the time, somewhere along the line, they might be like, dang, like she really gets it. Like
Hmm.
that thing. Like she knew what she wanted, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do a fair amount of work with the Enneagram, and I myself am a considerate helper. With twos and nines. And so for anybody unfamiliar with the Enneagram, it's think about we all have different sort of personality types. And if you're the type of person that thinks about life from through the lens of the group and harmony, and is this what everybody else wants, right? um it's particularly hard, right? Because even something as simple as takeout, like I care more about harmony for this evening, and if that means you getting what you want, I'm okay with that. I will fit into it. And both things can be true, right? You can live to be in service to others and please others, and we're all a work in progress. And you can speak up for the type of food you want to eat this evening, right? But it's tricky.
It is tricky, but this is the stuff of life, right? Like anything else. When we start practicing with the
Mhm.
small things, when it really doesn't matter what we have for dinner, it really doesn't matter, you know, what you're wearing or what you know what time you leave or
Yeah,
whatever. When those things, then when as the bigger, more challenging things come in, you'll have something to refer to, right? You'll have those files to pull out of your mind and be like, oh, I know how to do this. I've done this before. I've seen this before. Um, One of the questions that I love to ask with all of these things is when you're faced with different things. And I remember this first started showing up for me a lot when my kids were young and my kids were like all involved in sports and uh, they were just very active in a lot of things. And but I remember thinking like every time like a camp would come up or we were being asked to like do something or whatever, I always said, you know, what am I doing this for?
hmm
You know, what am I
hmm
doing this for? Am I doing this because my kid really wants to do this? Am I doing it because I want my neighbors to see me or I want this coach to like us or you know, there's a lot of reasons like that. And so that really helped me. And
hmm
so even in this kind of holiday season, you know, if you get invited to something or you feel pressured to do a thing or buy a thing, you know, you can ask yourself like what am I doing this for?
Yeah,
Now, you know, sometimes we do have to take one for the team. You know, sometimes you have to go
absolutely.
visit the grandmom in the nursing home because that's just what you need to do.
Yeah.
Nobody probably really wants to do it, but
Hmm.
you do it because that's like in your view is the right thing to do. And but then there's other things that maybe like your husband's company party where you're like I actually don't really like going to that, but you do kind of want to support your partner and he's asking you
Absolutely.
to go like so you go but maybe you say hey you know what like I'm fine with going but I'm gonna tap out like after like an hour or would you mind if we left at 9 o'clock. You know there's ways to create boundaries within the situation to make you feel more comfortable whether it's about drinking or just not or not
Hmm.
and so that kind of everybody wins you know.
That's a really, really good point. And one of my strategies is exactly that, which is you can respond with yes and.
Yeah.
yes, I'd like to go to your holiday party. And I'd like to come to agreement on the maximum amount of time we're going to stay there, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
that can be
absolutely.
really, really powerful. So it's not using and instead of a but can be really powerful too. Just one switch of the word can sort of change the whole experience of a conversation.
I agree with that, and I love it because these are the simple ways to say like both things can be true. I mean, some things
Mhm.
aren't compromisable, and that's challenging, and that's when the no's get really hard. Like, no, I'm not going on that trip, or no,
Mhm.
I'm not spending the money on that thing. Like, there's just not a compromise. You can't meet halfway, and so those are the harder ones, right? Where you're like, somebody is maybe going to be disappointed in
Mhm.
this. Somebody might be sad. Somebody's feelings might be hurt, and with all of those things there should be grace for yourself, but also extended to the other person too, like that they are allowed to have those feelings. So for example, if you and your family, this is just an example, decide like, this year we are going to stay home on Christmas morning, and we've decided that we're just going to do that, we're going to have our time or whatever, and we're not going to rush over to the in-laws or whatever in the morning. We'll get there around 1 o'clock.
Mhm.
And so presenting that to the person, the in-laws, will feel a little challenging, right? Because already you're going to be like, oh, like she's going to be disappointed. Or if you know them to be like combative, like what if she kind of comes at me? Like there's a lot of like kind of there's like consequences, right? And so you have to think all of that through and decide, is this worth it or not? And then decide, yes, it is, because this is what we want. And but just know that there are allowed to be angry. They're allowed to be
Mhm.
sad.
Mhm.
You're not allowed to like hurt someone, put your hands on somebody. You're not allowed to be violent. You're not allowed, and you really shouldn't call someone names or be rude. But people are allowed to be upset. And I think we
Absolutely.
get caught up in that. I see that a lot with my clients.
Absolutely. And I think also too stopping ourselves and asking, what is the outcome of this conversation I'm hoping to achieve? And that's different than what does success look like. But the outcome is I want to be clear on what I'm signing up for. And ideally, the person's not furious at me, but I also can't control that, right? But the outcome really is I'm clear, they understand. The rest of it is a hope. Um, there's a tool I use with clients. It's actually a dialectical behavior therapy technique that's really can use it for anything to help people communicate effectively and also regulate their emotions around said communication. And you've probably heard of it, Shelby, the Dear Man exercise,
No.
which is so Dear Man, it can be used both for asking for what you want, which we've talked about can be hard, and saying no to something. And Dear Man, DEARMAN, any of your listeners can look it up. It's an acronym, and each letter stands for, so if you think about it as a template, the D is for describing the situation, right? I want to stay home on Christmas morning this year. The E is for expressing your feelings. It's really important for us to start these new traditions where us and the kids are all at home and, we only have our littles for a certain period of time. I feel really strongly that I want it to be quiet and intimate and at our house. A is for asserting yourself, right? So you're saying it with authority, not aggressiveness, but assertiveness and authority. R is reinforcing your position, right? Again, it's really important that we see you, and it's really important that we spend some time alone at our house on Christmas morning. Um, M, being mindful of the other person, giving them space to process and respond. Um, and N, I forgot the A in there, I think, but the N, negotiate, right? So where are you willing to negotiate as the asker or the person saying no? Um, and knowing that before you go into this conversation, how about noontime? That feels like it will give us enough time to have our alone time in the morning and lots of time to mingle before we have the meal, is mid-afternoon. When you can kind of lay it out in that way, where it's coming from a place of, it's coming from more of a heart-centered place, but you're being assertive and you're having agency. It's surprising how well um, the conversation can go.
Hmm. I really like that. Thank you so much for sharing that acronym for Dear Man, and I'm definitely going to look that up too. I think that's really helpful and clear, and does provide like kind of a very nice roadmap for from beginning to end, well, and giving space for everybody's feelings. I do think we get a lot of us just myself, I can speak for myself, and I've seen it a lot. We do just get caught up in like, but she's going to be mad, or she's gonna be, and I did that as a young person. I thought, oh my gosh, if I speak up to my husband or I say this, he's gonna be mad. And I remember, my therapist saying, like, so what? He's
Hmm.
allowed to be mad. And I thought,
I know.
but I mean, we are allowed to have those things. And yes, it's uncomfortable and it's a weird feeling and it's a little bit awkward, but it's okay, And I think the more that we practice some of these things in our regular life, when the bigger things come up, it'll start to become much easier, almost like rote. Like it'll be our natural way eventually. And it's
Absolutely.
the same for all things, all areas, even work, with friendships, if your boss is like, hey, we really need some extra hands this weekend on this project. Can we count on you? And you're like, actually, I don't work on the weekends. And obviously this is very kind of job specific, and you would have to know your situation. Some of us do have to do things outside the box sometimes to kind of earn our keep. But if there's a consistent thing where somebody's asking you to stay late or always calling you after hours, you're allowed to sort of say, no, I don't take calls after 6 o'clock,
Mhm.
and just
Mhm.
like really establish that boundary. But if you don't do it, anything, people will continue to do what they're doing. And then we get
Ab-
upset and we want to complain about it, but we've allowed it.
Absolutely. And I think that's really where like the tail of this exercise comes in around being mindful of the other person and negotiating. Like being mindful of the other person can be something as simple as, I know you really need me to work in the evenings. I know that we're overworked. I know that we're overlaid, over scheduled. I get that. I'm sensitive to it. I'd like to find a way to solve for that more long term, right? Me coming in at night feels like putting a band-aid over it. So how about we spend some time together going through our processes, XYZ, right? Like the negotiation doesn't have to be, well, I'll come in 3 nights a week instead of 4 nights a week because nobody's happy with that, right? It's getting a conversation going, not a cause effect, offense, defense interaction.
I love that for all things. I think that is such an important and powerful conversation. And a lot of times I feel like, especially on the fly, I know for me and a lot of people, it's hard to think of those things, when you're being pressed, and
Mhm.
someone's coming at you, even if it's not aggressive, but like, it's hard to think that way, like very critically. It's hard to like critically think out a plan. But if
Yes.
you can sort of take the moment to like refrain, reflect, and then respond either in that moment or say, hey, I just need a little time to think about this. I'm really interested in figuring out how we can all win here.
Yeah.
Like you do become the negotiator, but maybe you don't have a solution right this second, but there probably is one. But it's
And
okay to
you're
say, hey, let me think about it for a hot minute, or let me go talk to my husband, or let me chat with the kids, and then I'm going to circle back and we're going to finish this conversation.
absolutely. And that you just hit the nail on the head that just by doing that is acknowledging that this thing that you're being asked for is important to the other person. You're validating that. You're not saying yes or no at that point, but they may not realize it, but that's half the battle for them, right?
I'll say this last thing, then we're going to wrap it up. But I remember when the kids were little and you're trying to get out of the house, you probably do. I have 3 kids. We're trying to get to the preschool and all the things. And my oldest one was always very chatty, and she's like always talk, 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 talk. And we're like we were very routinized. Everything was extremely scheduled. So like we had a time. We followed it every single morning, and she's always like talking at me, and I remember saying to her, like, I would look at her and say, hey, like what you have to say is like so important to me. I really want to hear what you have to say, but can we talk about that in the car, because we have to get in the car. So
Hmm.
that was like always
Hmm.
my workaround, and I think about that a lot and kind of use it as an easy example when I'm working with people, because it sounds silly, but I've acknowledged her. I looked at her, I let her know she's important, and I'm not going to forget about it. I'm going to be like, hey, what were you trying to say to me? So I am going to
Yes.
always circle back, but we also were going to get in the car so we're not late.
It's like you're in my 10-year-old son's room with me every night at bedtime when he's 10 minutes past when he should be asleep and he's asking me the big life questions. And I'm just like, I love that you're asking me this. Let's carve out some time tomorrow after school when we've got all the time in the world to talk about this.
Or maybe you're busy, you're doing a podcast or you're on an email and they come at you and you're like, oh my gosh, like I really want to be able to give you my full attention because you're
Mhm,
what you have to say is so important, but I'm like right in the middle of this thing. I'll be done in 15 minutes.
mhm,
I think
mhm.
people just forget that that is an option. Like we're allowed to like reframe that whole situation, and instead they get upset about the interruption. But I think the upsetness is really like a feeling of like I don't know how to solve this, or I don't know what to do. I want to serve my child or my boss or whoever, and I don't know how. And so they get frustrated, and then that
Mhm.
frustration comes out as like, get away, or you're interrupting, or an explosion instead
Yeah,
of an actual like negotiation, which I think we can all really, really learn how to do that if we slow down, take a pause, and really try. So thank you so
absolutely.
much for your time, Julie. I know this was a quick conversation, but I can see us coming back together in the year. But I wanted to give everybody like a little bit of a quick shot on how to say no and let go this holiday season. So how do you like people to get a hold of you if they want to?
Yeah, sure. So people can get a hold of me. They can find me on Instagram or Facebook or my website, Julie Dereshinsky Coaching. I know that's a doozy, but Google's good at finding me. Or they can always drop me an email at julie@jwdcoaching.com.
Awesome. I'll make sure I link to those in the show notes below. So thanks again for your time, and I hope you have a fantastic holiday season.
Thanks so much, Shelby. Happy holidays.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Was mine thing not recording?
No, it said it. This meeting is being recorded and it's content. It said recording stopped. Do you think it didn't record?
That was like the recording
Oh no.
for the YouTube. Oh my God. I think I didn't record it on my computer, which is weird. Hmm. I thought I did hit it, but I don't because it's showing me the record button. That's how I know. Anyway,
Ugh.
maybe I can grab it off of YouTube.
Okay. If we need to do a 2.0 at some point, happy
Yeah.
to. I don't know
Well,
how we'd
let's do that.
recreate that lovely conversation, but I'm
Our
happy
conversation
to.
really flowed so easily, so I can see us definitely coming back together next year and doing a longer episode, a little bit more pointed with like some more specific stuff. So
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'd be
yeah.
happy to.
Well, thank you
Thank
for
you
your
so
time.
much, Shelby, and I hope you have great holidays, and I'm sure we'll chat in the new year.
Yeah, I'll look forward to it.
All right, take
All
care.
right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.